this is still not something that we wake up and we're like, I'm really excited to share about my sexual brokenness and how it blew up my marriage.
On a podcast.
Yeah,
for
right.
thousands
So
of people to hear.
what was that? What was that shift for you guys? Like, how did you find the courage initially to start sharing your story? And then maybe even too, what's it looked like now that you've been sharing it as often as you have? Like, how has it changed as well?
Well, when we moved, like Nate said, we found a church, we found a life group. In our life group, we openly shared, like, yeah, we're sitting here. Yes, we have like a 3-month-old and a 1.5-year-old, and we sleep in separate bedrooms. We are completely separated, but trying to figure this out. So we were open and honest with that group. And in our group was a worship pastor at our church. And so I think you had met with our head pastor. We just were like going to be really open with that. And so that led a year later to our pastor doing a series where he was like, would you ever just record a snippet of forgiveness? Right. And so we did, we prayed about that, and we were in a pretty good headspace. And so I had just really read the book Prodigal God by Timothy Keller. And it really, like, for me, kind of was a huge part of my religious restoration, really. And just like, oh my gosh, Nate has been the prodigal son, but I've been the big brother just standing there mad at God and missing out on the feast that now Nate was having with the Lord. Because as he talked about, he had like this great, the Lord was like moving in his life, but I was really having a opposite religious experience. Like, Lord, what about all those prayers early on in marriage that I was praying over my husband? And what about all this journal full of prayers that, like, how could this possibly have happened? And so we were kind of having an opposite religious experience, but that book really helped me just kind of open my eyes and see, like, I'm actually missing out on communion and connection with God because of my anger, because of my hurt here, and because of not understanding the why that God had. And so that was kind of a perfect timing to really share that. So we shared, and then that led to, like, a year later, would you share again? But this time on the stage. And then at the time by then we were like 4 years into recovery. And so then we started slowly becoming our pastor's, like, back pocket when someone would call in the church with this. And he's like, I don't know what to do.
I know who to send these people to.
That's right.
So then we slowly started being like, hey, if we send a babysitter to your house, would you go show up at their house and just minister to these people? And so we did that for a long period of time.
That's cool.
And we were both working different jobs. And so we just slowly started sharing more and more from the stage. We slowly started sharing more and more with other couples. We slowly got asked to lead the establishment of like a sexual addiction recovery program in our church. And so we got another pastor in our church to get PSAT trained. And a group of us came to one of the Pure Desire universities and learned about groups. And we started having groups meet at our church. And so we just started doing this mentoring and work in that arena. But I say it's a fluke, but the Lord knew what he was doing. I had gotten my master's in counseling right out of college. I got asked to stay on and coach our golf program and get like an assistant grad and get my master's paid for. And so I was like, well, I'll do counseling.
That's great. Yeah,
for
sure.
It was so, and then I did not love the experience I had. And so then I went back to education and taught. And so then once we were about maybe 7 years into our own recovery, our CSAT finally said to me, like, you're showing up at people's house, you're mentoring them, you're telling them, hey, go find a CSAT. You're bringing them all these resources, and there's not a resource in your state. Why are you not, like, why aren't you doing this?
Yeah.
And so then we started just really praying about that. And eventually we're able to just take the step to get licensed in our state.
Wow.
And then immediately I went on and got trained as a CSAT as well, so that we could start helping professionally people in our state.
That's so cool.
Yeah, God works. It's awesome.
Yeah. And there was a lot in there. I mean, I think I would answer your question is maybe a little bit differently. What made it easier, I think, was still trying to be healthy myself and still trying to do work with no matter how much I felt like I was making improvement. Like you said it, Trevor, vulnerability is always hard. It's always challenging to share. And so I think to continue to have people around me, accountability around me, continue to work with a CSAT, to work with a coach, just to stay healthy myself, help keep me grounded enough where when the opportunities arose to be able to share authentically our story, we tried, if we were in an okay place and in a healthy place, to be able to step into that and do that. And it was, Maggie gave some highlights there, but it's really crazy to see God continue to open doors as we begin to do that.
I just think like at first for us, it was like we must be the only people on the planet who are in this level of crisis and experiencing this level of insanity that we felt like it had created. Right. And then we did support groups ourselves, and it was like, okay, a breath of fresh air. We're not alone. Other people get it. And there's resources and there's help and that felt really great. But then the first time that we sat and talked with another couple and we were able to help them, and the feeling of walking away and feeling like, you know what, God is using the garbage in our life and the pain for his glory, it just like lit a different level of like, okay, I think that also probably helped my healing because it made sense of the like, why God questions that I had. I started to be like, okay, God, maybe you can use this. Maybe you have a plan that's bigger than me that I can make sense of. And so that was a huge part of the healing process for us too, that just has brought our heart to where we're at now, to just wanting to help people.
Yeah. I can so relate to that, because I think the first times you tell your story, you do kind of take this deep breath and like, okay, here we go. And how are they going to respond? And just the fear of kind of having that be known by someone else. And then when they not only respond positively with like, oh, thank you for sharing, but they go to that next level of, because me too, because that's our story. And you start to have some, in my story, it was having, men come to my office that they would share their story. And when they would get to the end and say, and I never felt safe to tell anyone until you shared your story. And that moment of like, wow, Lord, thank you that out of fear, I almost chose not to share it and just try to ignore it and go on with my life and be thankful for my healing, but not share it. But in that choice of sharing, I gave someone else that same space that they never had. And you do kind of go to that 180 of like, wow, this is amazing that my brokenness allows someone else to face theirs. And together now we're experiencing new grace and freedom, and it just changes everything.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. It really does.
Yeah, my buddy Luke describes it as like giving people the gift of going second, and what a gift that is. And people did that for us. There were couples early on that people put us in touch with who had been through a similar experience, and it was such a gift to say there's hope. And thankful for Pure Desire in a massive way to connect to resources and groups, right, where there can find hope in a time that seems really, really, really hopeless.